Hello, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Future-Proof Your Food and Beverage Production with Scalable Digitization. My name is Megan, and I'm the moderator today. During today's webinar, we'll discuss the challenges that food and beverage manufacturers face and the need to shift to digitizing your workforce with a human focus. Then we'll get into the roadmap to digitizing your food and beverage production lines and how to get started. And I am excited to introduce our main speakers today. So first we have Dave Patrickus, who is a customer success manager here at Tulip with over 24 years of manufacturing experience in engineering, quality, lean practices, and continuous improvement across multiple industries, especially food and beverage. We also have Kailey, who will be joining us momentarily. She is a solutions engineer here at Tulip with an engineering and IT background. She works with current and potential customers, building the best solutions and applications to meet their operational goals.
All right, great. Thanks, Megan. We're going to take a look first at the current state of food and beverage, right? So there's been, with the pandemic and just current state of the economy, there's lots of disruptions and rising challenges. So the kind of way that we think about it is there's definitely opportunities, right? So some stats we have here, 43% increase in ordering takeout, in August 2020. I'll see a 54% increase in sales of plant-based sustainable food since 2018, right? So some great opportunities for the food and beverage industries, but then there's also some challenges or problems. Example being, everyone who's probably on this webinar today is experiencing it, whether at home or in the industry, right? 10% increase in food costs in the 12 months ending in May 2022. And there's only so much of that we can control, right? You're working with suppliers, trying to negotiate the best prices you can. Commodity prices are increasing. It's just definitely a challenge. But what we can control is the 45% of what manufacturers are, that have been surveyed, rating talent retention as their number one concern, right? So the change in the workforce, temporary labor. Hey, Kailey.
Hey, everybody.
It's just very dynamic and definitely challenging, right? The rising labor costs. So what can we do about that? So this is a little view, just two examples of what we've heard from some of our customers. So Kailey, I think you saw this most recently, all right? 15% rise in cost of eggs. Maybe you can share a little more detail around that one.
Yeah, before we get into it, I just want to apologize for being late, and I'm going to cut my camera in case my Wi-Fi decides to fail me again. But yeah, to go off of kind of what we're hearing from our customers, we had a conversation a couple weeks back talking about simply just the rise in price of eggs, and it was a 15% rise, equating to a $10 million cost on the operations side. So, and that's one point, that's one raw material, but I think it really speaks broadly to how much fluctuation there is out there and how much that really trickles down and affects operations.
Yeah, and a customer I talked to, just in the last few weeks, we were visiting and getting to understand, temp labor, I think in general is everywhere in food and beverage, but we were talking just the challenges around temp labor. And they said anytime, any day, they could have up to 60% of their workers are temporary. So they might be there a week, a day, month. Definitely challenging getting those folks up to speed, trained well, make sure minimizing mistakes. And then even the ones, how do you retain folks, right? You want to empower them with knowledge to help them make decisions, make them feel valued, that type of thing. So it's definitely a few of the things we've heard from customers along the way. And then as we kind of look at the opportunities, we kind of see it in two different buckets here. There's the scale up opportunities. So where existing producers, they're maybe adding new lines or trying to get more productivity out of their existing lines, right? Trying to avoid those capital expenditures. But then there's also the startup opportunities and how to bring new products into food categories as customer demands are changing and trying to get to that market first. So with the rising costs and the high workforce turnover, there's definitely some challenges that we talked about. It. Rising costs, definitely a macro problem. You can't solve this problem. You're just trying to offset it, not affect your margins. High workforce turnover. It's really everyone's problem. How can you solve this by investing in people? We'll talk a little bit about that today. How do you eliminate that net knowledge loss as people leave or retire?
Yeah, so to kind of go off of the last two slides that Dave just covered, so it was two different opportunities, covered kind of two different challenges. One thing that is going to be a huge theme of this kind of entire webinar is a common thread or commonality between all of these, which we've kind of identified as people. So, there's only so much you can do for things that are outside of your control. But focusing on the people in your operations, you can really do, rise to the occasion for those certain opportunities that are out there, and then also help address the more low-hanging fruit that exists.
So here's just kind of a look at, how the focus has changed, particularly with the pandemic, right? Pre-pandemic focus, maybe we weren't emphasizing enough focus on the operator, the human-centric aspect. Post-pandemic, I think it's all become more and more clear that we need to have a little more of a human-centric focus. Give our opportunities to operators, technicians, but really supporting the people that are running those machines. So again, who are these people that we're trying to support? Our most important aspects. We have our experienced operators, using paper and existing knowledge to do the job. Want more data to improve processes. So those are there. And then we look at kind of our temp workers. They're digital native typically, right? They relies on tribal knowledge from experts passed down to them. So how do we get them quickly ramped up? Particularly with temp workers, right? They're there for a short amount of time. How do you get them, day one, working with quality, safety, all of those aspects? And then we have our process engineers who want direct feedback from operators and implement new ideas fast, right? Usually, how do we get those tools? They know the answers, but how do we make their jobs efficient so they can make changes rapidly? And then plant managers, right? They want to know how the plant is performing in real time, scoreboards or scorecards, dashboards, that type of thing. So automation is definitely important, but you need the right people to get the most out of it. These are just kind of some of the expectations and what we've seen as the reality of them, right? So expectation on automations, it's fast impact, but usually takes time to implement. So those have already, gone through high level automation. It doesn't happen overnight. Many times it takes months, years, and a lot of focus and resources. The other one I just focus on is, OEE. Typically, I think folks think OEE means instant improvement, right? You might see that out of the gate, but how do you sustain that? It doesn't inherently drive better results. It's just a scorecard. How do you get that intrinsic effort out of operators and technicians and your engineers to make a difference and get that return? So we'll kind of dive into the second part here where we're digitization with a human focus, right? So we're changing the mindset. It includes guiding operators with digital apps, right? How do we eliminate having paper on the floor? How do you make sure your documents are up to date? You're tracking production data to improve processes versus trying to compile data that, maybe it's downtime, for example, right? You're trying to pull that together and you're looking at today's data tomorrow or a week later. How do you improve? How do you make and effectively drive change now to reduce your losses? Make sure you're winning. Okay. You're using data from workers, work orders, and machines to make informed decisions, right? Implementing new ideas faster, make positive impact. How can you take those, perhaps, you don't have any digital tools now. You might get ideas from operators or your maintenance techs or any group, right? Your CI folks. Maybe have piles of post-it notes that, get sometimes slip through the cracks. How do you get that feedback from the operators to help them make improvements?
Yeah, and something else to add in here, each of these components of digitization with a focus on augmenting workers, these are focused on the personas that we originally identified, right? The experienced operators and the temp workers or newcomers that are, digital first. These are all really aligned with, each of those personas and should be considered in the decision-making process and when improving almost any portion of your operations.
So these are kind of the pillars we see of successful digitization strategies.
So taking all of that, just to kind of start talking about how we kind of see digitization and how you should approach it. These are kind of 4 pillars that we've identified with the customers that we've worked with to kind of be able to bucket use cases, if you will. So, if you are in a place where maybe you don't know necessarily where to start, I think this is a good natural progression. So starting with low-hanging fruit things like pursuing digital work instructions. So again, we talk about the people aspect of your operations, digitizing really all of your paper-based work instructions. The second bucket here, line performance. So beyond just OEE, and to kind of get away a little bit from that acronym, but really getting an understanding of how your lines are running, being able to capture different even micro stoppage events. So instead of the day after, kind of having that morning meeting where you run through everything that happened the day prior, being able to kind of in the moment react to things as they're happening. And then of course, shop floor visualization. So once you have a good pulse on line performance and you're able to capture the more human element of performance through your digital instructions, really being able to visualize that and really intuitive screens that can kind of help you get that pulse check. And then that fourth pillar is what you're able to do with those 3 buckets. So really being able to drive the continuous improvement piece and making that continuously iterative. So to break that pillar 1 down a little bit more, that train your workforce, we have a use case here. So working with a coffee manufacturer who identified a problem that they needed to ensure that operators were fully trained to do specific tasks. And the solution that they went for was just digital work instructions. So the reason why that can be such a low-hanging fruit, but with such a high impact, is because they were able to tap into their more experienced workforce, their more veteran-like operators, tap into them for the wealth of knowledge that they have, document that, and then provide it to, their, whether it's part of their temp workforce or their younger workforce, and really use it as a training aid to kind of serve the on-the-job training. To give you a visualization of what it actually looks like. So on the left, by it, I mean kind of Tulip and digital work instructions, you have this icon of, it's an image of some folks working, and there's some digital screens there in their work environment. And then on the right side of the screen is kind of an example of what that might look like. So in this case, it looks like we are kind of working through a weigh and dispense procedure, but we also have some digital work instructions there. Another really important thing that, I want to mention here is the value that you are able to provide for the person using this application. So there's this kind of decision tree where you kind of place the onus on folks to have to react to certain things as they're happening in real time and kind of find their own way down the decision tree. Like, okay, this happened. Oh, I have to remember. What do I do now? So by digitizing these workflows, you remove that burden where it's all built in the no-code logic of the process of building out your business logic. So, just as things are happening in real time, the app is kind of guiding you for what that progression workflow should be.
Yeah, Kailey. So I think example being it's 2 a.m., third shift, and you have a relatively new operator, right? They don't maybe necessarily remember the decision tree. Do I contact QA? Do I contact my supervisor? I think I might have a non-conformance. And this is all built right into it, right? The decision tree and workflows can all be built into the app, helps with the work instructions. Any recent changes, right, are all built right into this with the easy no-code ability.
Exactly. And I think that's a great anecdote. And when you're building them, part of what you build into it is you tap on those kind of wealth of knowledges within your organization that know the tricky little things to do in certain scenarios. So, your phase 1 of these digital work instructions do not have to have every single piece to the puzzle in them. But as you build and you iterate and you add, they just get that more and more powerful.
And kind of another example or pillar tool around line performance. So we work with a chocolate manufacturer where they were unable to see the production inefficiencies. They kind of intrinsically knew or thought they understood it, but they really didn't have the data to provide that back. So they wanted to understand their bottlenecks. We were able to, it was pretty much a legacy machine. They weren't in a position to buy, something new or more advanced, but we were able to just provide some simple sensors on this analog machine to provide them track performance, understand the real-time performance and optimize things. So the cool thing here is they saw, a 15% increase in their pieces per shift, which that's a tremendous jump. And along with that, their uptime and just their process visibility and just the transparency across the organizations from the plant manager to the operators of understanding how they're performing. It's pretty cool.
And then a third one, the shop floor visualization. Here's an example from a customer of ours who they're in the frozen food space. They were more mature from a digital perspective, and they really kind of came down to the thorn in our side, our issue, what's holding us back is mostly just the lack of visualization.
With this, really thinking when you have this visualization, you can really manage by exception, right? We all only have so much time in the day, only so much resources. How do you make sure you're spending the right place at the right time? So with this visualization, you're really getting down to managing by exception. I should be, in this case, looking at the red areas. Where am I in red? What am I going to focus on to help minimize my losses or my gaps? So this is just kind of a high level kind of process flow of a typical food and beverage company, pre-op through packaging. The cool thing with Tulip, right? We can build upon whatever biggest pains we have and build upon that iteratively. Particularly training your workforce and retaining them. Talk about a little about reducing giveaways, and then you can kind of see how it plays out in the different aspects of the workflow. From understanding your root causes, we looked at a little bit of the way into spends, GMP or GXP audits, recipe downloads. How do you keep those up to date? And really the digital tools allow that. So you probably all have experienced, hey, we have a new product coming in and it's just like this product XYZ. And it's just not. And how do you get that information to the operators quickly of those adjustments? Oh, we realize we have to change temperatures or we have to run a different speed. How can you do that quickly? And we've worked with customers that can do those and create those workflows quickly and get the information to the operators to empower them. And then kind of the next ones that popping up here, we got line leader monitoring center lines are just kind of the common ones. You'll see center lines definitely, as you understand, providing data, right? People, like I think in past life, example where we saw a variation across shifts, right? Every shift runs the same speed. And I've never seen that before. They should. We all have standards, right? But trying to understand what those are. Second shift was running way faster. And the thought was that production was higher in second shift, when in reality, third shift was running slower, had less waste, less quality issues, and total throughput was much higher. But without the data, it's very hard to have those conversations and to truly understand what your standards are. So this is where, if you're in the CI world, which I was past, you really can create a system of continuous improvement, right? Plan, do, check, act. The app editor allows you to make these changes quickly. I think if you're running Kaizens, right, like how can you see changes that you made on, say it's a 5-day Kaizen, right? The changes or opportunities you found on Monday, you can quickly implement and find it, make changes in the app editor. So Tuesday, if those changes were helpful. And then you're getting real-time process data back. So come Wednesday, or let's even say following the Kaizen, how do you verify and validate that, one, the changes you made are being followed, or are you getting the gains that you had hoped to, right? So you can quickly do that, particularly in large operations where, again, managing by exception, how can you figure out where you should be spending your time? So 3, how can food and beverage manufacturers reduce waste? And when we talk waste, we're thinking of the 8 waste, whether that's inventory, scrap, just movement, motion, all 8 of those. Really underutilizing the human aspect is what we're going to focus on here, though. So what does that shift look like, right? You may kind of typical processes, you're going to start with some type of pain assessment, find your gaps, whether that's, a simple kind of pick chart or value stream mapping, or just what keeps you up at night, right? Got to understand your priorities, evaluate. We'll kind of have another chart here to kind of go through that, but really is the agile implementation. So you can't solve all these problems at once. You can't help every portion of your operations, but you got to start driving improvements. There's no need to rip and replace any systems you have now. You can start small and be really adaptive changes as you go. So the next slide kind of looks at how you can help find these, and really the low-hanging fruit should be your priority. How can you go at those quick wins, build momentum, and continue to find those? And then how do you share those and knowledge share across other lines, other facilities of what you learned? You can kind of see here the business impact versus ease of implementation. Really in that top right corner, that should be where you're focusing to start. You can create quick apps within Tulip, integrate with machines as needed, but you don't need to, right? Keep it simple. And then as you go, you're enabling your engineers, and you're really having that bottom-up improvements. The other ones where you got to proceed with caution, where the business impact maybe is lower and the ease of implementation is a little harder, right? Not every project needs to be a full-fledged, IT project with engineering and production. It just draws it out, and you're not going to get those quick wins and that low-hanging fruit, which is going to keep you ahead of the competition. So, the agile and lean, they kind of all stole from one another, but really finding that first pain point. And again, this is basically plan, do, check, and act, right? So you identify your goals, you gather your team, you're implementing sprints, and you're iterating and improving. So when we think about capturing value, we're thinking within weeks and months. Again, it's not a rip and replace. It's not going to take years to capture the value. You're going to start to see that immediate value, and it also allows you to adapt quickly. So, heaven forbid you have any corrective actions that you need to get back to, you can quickly build an app and get that out to your workforce to minimize those opportunities or corrective actions. And I think the big thing, keep in mind, it's a journey. You want to start with small projects, build value, build momentum, and really starting a first strong foundation for scale. You can keep it small, but you can definitely scale up very easily. You don't need to rip and replace the entire system. And the biggest thing with all this is you want to sustain your changes, right? No one wants to make a change, ruffle feathers, change people's lives, and then have it go right back to what it was, 3 months from now. You need that feedback. You need to ensure there's relevance to the project and reinforce those changes. Again, focus on the pains. Don't chase the metrics, the OEE. Identify your critical pains, and focus on building those tactical solutions. And then humans at the center. Those human operators have tons of knowledge. Empower them with data so they can make the right decisions, to be drivers of change. So again, really, hopefully there's 3 themes that you came out from today. Food and beverage industry, it's always changing. I think my experience is definitely one of the most industries that quick to get product to customers from, initial idea to on either the table or the grocery store shelf, right? Adaptation means survival. And then shifting to a digital mindset with keeping the human in mind. It's critical for manufacturers. You have to seek to scale up and establish these operations. And again, sustainability. So sustainable changes, so you break down your problems into bite-sized projects, right? Make them manageable, get some wins, and continue to leverage the technology to augment your humans, whether that's technicians, maintenance, QA, continuous improvement, whatever it might be. How can you help them with that?
Awesome, great. I do want to get kind of right into some of the questions that we've gotten so far in the questions tab. And if you haven't had any questions, be sure to ask your questions now and throughout this Q&A session. And we'll get to all of them. So first, the first question here is: digitization is costly. How do I convince upper management to invest when we're trying to cut down cost and tighten up our margin?
Yeah. So again, find that pain point. Whether it's a quality issue, you don't understand your production losses, maybe. How can you make your audits easier? Whatever that might be, find that quick win. Building these apps is, again, it's not a rip and replace. So you can start very cost effective and prove the value and see your return.
That's great. And another question here about Tulip customers. So are customers of Tulip products, digital work instructions, building dashboards, et cetera, are they capable of being modified, or is that something that has to be done through Tulip?
So really we want, Megan, you can respond as well, but really our model is we want to train our customers to build this. We have some customers that really have some basic knowledges and they take off running, right? And then there's others that leverage, whether it's our community or our knowledge base or our office hours. Really, I think our community, the involvement we see with customers sharing ideas and helping one another has been tremendous. Really, so you're not waiting on Tulip or having to invest additional funds to get you there.
Yeah.
To add a little bit more color to that, I think the really only mandatory technical skills required to build successful Tulip apps are very much a similar mix of building out Excel and building out PowerPoint. Certainly do not need any software development experience. And where we see the most success with the most effective applications are really with folks who come with the process knowledge. So the owner of the problem, who feels the pain the most of what you're trying to solve, being able to drive that into the app that you're building, that's really the skill set. So we're very much building a product intended to fully be a toolbox for your process owners.
Yeah, Kailey, and right, our library is, I think, a really underutilized tool, right? So we have a library of apps to get customers started and start getting data and getting that value, but then they can always go back and tweak those, which is really important, kind of the overall Tulip ecosystem, I think.
Yeah, that's the goal, because then that's how you really start to feed into the continuous improvement motion. Yeah,
and there's actually a section within the library for food and beverage, specific applications. Their connector with NetSuite is commonly used with our food and beverage customers as well. So just something to call out. Another question here we have, can implementation or repeat implementation be done without Tulip on-site support?
Yes, definitely.
100%, especially post-pandemic.
Awesome. Well, do you have an example of, a customer that you're working with right now that's always implementing or changing applications? Is there a specific use case that you see specifically for food and bev?
Sure. So one in particular is around tracking changeovers and I guess downtime, but started as a changeover and it's quickly evolved. And really the big thing is understanding their downtime, and that's evolved. What they thought was the main contributors has changed, and then they've been able to do deep dives and quickly build apps to focus on those pain points.
So what is the average time to value that you see for customers after implementing work instruction applications?
So I think that kind of depends on where you're at, right? Are you using any digital tools right now at all? If you're working with sheer paper or limited work instructions at all, I guess my experience is work instructions typically go into one big binder and sit on the shelf, and they may be used. Sometimes it's not really incorporated or part of the work, so it's a challenge for operators to use them. So if you're at that state and you can quickly implement kind of dynamic work instructions, that kind of what we saw with the weigh and dispense that Kailey mentioned, you'll quickly see that value, right? You're minimizing mistakes, you're capturing data, from like a quality perspective, when you're looking at data, you're not concerned. You can build kind of pokeyoke into the apps. So if the value is supposed to be 125 and you maybe traditionally operators would big finger it or miswrite by accident, right? There's able to minimize those mistakes.
I think, in other words, another term for that is what we call is do it right the first time. So if you move forward with work instructions like that have the business logic built in, and especially if you're coming from nothing from that perspective, then I think that's immediate value.
The other one that comes to mind, we didn't touch on it too much, but as far as like for your like quality group, and when you're doing audits with your external, whether it's your customers or your SQFs of the world, right? You can show a lot of confidence when you can quickly capture records, right? Traditionally, maybe you had to go into the records room and find it. Oh, and that's a maintenance record. Now I got to go to the maintenance department and find records. Meanwhile, your auditor's sitting there waiting, or they're coming with, right? Just time. But you can, exude a lot of confidence with the auditors, and they begin to trust your processes. It just makes it a lot easier as a QA group.
Great. A couple more questions we have here. How capable is the platform to get data from existing machines, sensors, et cetera? And I think this person means Tulip's platform. So how similar to the chocolate manufacturer example, are there other examples of connecting machines and sensors and other components to the platform to get data?
Yeah, so there's tons of different integrations that we worked with, whether that's ERP systems or maybe it's a Bluetooth scale or calipers or that type of thing, ignition, all types of things. And be honest, when we're asked, we're typically like, no, but we'll figure it out, right? There's a lot of similarities. So we're not scared of any challenge, that's for sure.
Awesome. How about if you want to do a material ad and want to input the amount automatically from a SCADA? I would assume there would be an interface build out or a connection with an ERP.
Yes. And that's definitely something we can help with if we don't already have like one of our standard connectors built, or we can look to build that or provided, our expertise. There's a variety of different ways to go about it, I guess, that we've done with a variety of customers. So.
Tulip has a great team, a customer support team to work to fix bugs, as well as a customer success team like Dave here to find the best solution to set up the right applications.
And the cool thing is we're always learning more and more. Actually, just working with a customer now that is having some challenges, but we're all able to look internally and see what other customers are doing similar things. And sharing that knowledge and connecting when possible. So you're really leveraging the whole Tulip community to help you solve things.
Great. Well, before people hop off, we do have an upcoming webinar with a featured customer and partner, Stanley Black & Decker. Sophia Barron is a continuous improvement engineer, and she'll be sharing her story on connecting and augmenting the factory at Stanley Black & Decker at that specific location. So we'll be sending some resources for you to register, but be sure to save the date. And thanks again for taking the time to join us today. Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Kailey. Really appreciate you sharing your insight.
Great. Make sure to reach out with questions, folks.
Thanks so much, everyone.